Hello, my friends, and welcome to the Two Trees. I'm doing the introduction because Martin's not paying attention.
I did the rambling ones, John. This is you.
That was like 20 minutes ago.
I know.
We're on
already.
to new things. Well, I'm John Dillon, and I'm here with Rose,
Hi, everybody.
Martin,
Hey, all.
and Jacob.
What's
The
up?
finest of folks are all assembled here. We are still in Michigan. I have seen 0 Sasquatches, and that is sorrowful.
You've also seen Zero Trout.
That is also true. They
That must
lie
mean
under
trout
the
does not
water
exist.
and they grin at me maliciously. But no, we're continuing our discussion about supernatural beings, and one of the topics that I sometimes get asked about is about the book of Enoch. In particular, about a phrase that it uses that is a really uncommon phrase in the Bible, and that's the idea of the word watcher. Martin was under the opinion that that was someone who collected Rolexes, Timex, that sort of thing.
Or I think it's like a stalker, someone who's watching.
Yes,
Just it's terrible though.
it could be. It's
Have you ever seen the movie Rear Window? It's an old movie. Have
No.
you seen anybody? Alfred Hitchcock?
no, but I like Alfred Hitchcock.
Speaking of Watchers, this guy's in his, but they remade it in the 90s.
Is that the one with Johnny
Reeves.
Depp?
No, goodness. Well, actually, I don't know. The Alfred Hitchcock
Absolutely
one.
not.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, it could be.
Well, I only saw the
Have
one
you
with
seen it,
Christopher
Rose?
Reeves once. So, but then, anyway, speaking of Watchers, watch it sometime. It's good.
Well, I don't know about Alfred Hitchcock, but I do know a little bit about the ones that are talked about in the Bible and in extra biblical literature, which is just books that were written by people living during the biblical times. There were lots of books that were written and were popular. That doesn't mean they were scripture, but it does mean they were part of the culture that the people of scripture were living in. And so understanding those books, reading them, isn't the same as reading scripture, but it is a great way to get context into understanding how people of that time thought and talked about spiritual ideas, questions, conversations that they were having. And one of those books is a book called First Enoch. And it's part of something that people call the pseudepigrapha, which means the false writings. And that sounds really dramatic and like you're a liar kind of a thing. But really what it is it's a style of literature where you spoke in the voice of someone else. It would be like if I wrote a book and pretended to be Ben Franklin. I would be telling something about Ben Franklin or the life of during the Revolution. But everyone listening to it would understand, okay, this isn't written by Ben Franklin, but it's about these ideas. And so what the book of First Enoch is it's a collection of the ancient Jewish myths about the before the flood times. And it talks about a group of angelic rebels and calls them the Watchers. It's not a word that you're going to find in Genesis or in many of the early books of the Bible, but later in Old Testament history, around the time of Daniel and that sort of a thing, that term comes into common usage. And I don't know that it's a species designator. It seems to be more of an office, that they're doing a job. And the word watcher can be confusing because it seems to be talking about two different groups. There's a group of angels who rebel before the flood, and the book of Enoch calls those watchers. And then you have a group of angels who are in rebellion to God after the flood, and they don't seem to be the same group of people or angels or supernatural beings. It gets confusing. But what we see here is that it's not so much a species designator as much as it is they're doing something. And so the word watcher is used properly to refer to a supernatural being who has power over the nations of the earth, the peoples of the earth. These aren't just supernatural beings who are loving life out in the wilderness and being mean spirits. These are ones that have the desire to twist nations themselves. And the Bible kind of talks this way, that it isn't just human beings who are bad, but that there are powers behind the throne, so to speak. Paul talks about this in Ephesians 6, which is probably the most famous of the spiritual warfare texts. He says, we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against the princes, the principalities, the powers, the rulers of the darkness of this world, the spiritual wickedness in the high places. All of that is there to talk about this idea that there is organized evil that is intent on manipulating the kingdoms of mankind. And that makes sense if you think about it. If you can tempt one person into doing something evil, you can affect a tremendous amount of people. If you can corrupt an entire nation or the leadership of a nation, you exponentially grow the terror, the evil that's possibly to be involved in this. And so the idea is that this is an angelic being, a supernatural being, who has rule over a territory, over a people. And in the Old Testament, it talks about a being called the Prince of Persia. This would be one of the Watchers. The Prince of Greece. This is an angelic being who had power over that particular group. Now, is it static? Is this like an elected office? All the bad guys got together and voted for their favorite dictator in this country? It doesn't seem to be. And I would imagine that office can change hands. I doubt very seriously that the unseen world on the evil side is very polite, and that they think, well, he outranks me, so, I'm just stuck down here.
We see this Prince of Persia, Prince of Greece. I mean, should our minds start thinking these are kind of bound or in control over territories or areas? And is this connected to Genesis 11 and those kinds of things?
So in Genesis 11, which is the Tower of Babel sequence, and in Deuteronomy 32, it describes how the people, having rebelled against God again, reached up into the heavens with a desire to manipulate the supernatural world, either to make God do what they wanted him to do and to localize the deity so you could control him, or this was a throwback to the gods of the before the flood world and saying, we want that again. And God seems to have given them the desire of their heart and said, listen, if you want that, then I give you over to them. And instead of just washing his hands and moving on and letting mankind be broken, after Genesis 11, we get this story of how God creates a new nation and brings about the salvation of the whole world through this line of Israel. And so the story of Israel is intimately connected with the idea of the Watchers. These are the powers behind the throne. Bible Project did a really good video on the supernatural beings. And they have this scene in there where you have a really angry king on a throne, and behind the throne is this shadowy, ghost-like character. And so I thought that was a really powerful image, and it's stuck in my mind. But if you read the book of Enoch, you're going to find the story of what the ancient Jews believed happened in the book of Genesis chapter 6, where the sons of God come down to earth and they bear children. And so rather than me tell you about it, I'm going to have Rose, if you don't mind, would you read that for us?
Sure. 1 through 6. Is that what you said? All right. When man began to multiply on the face of the land, and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of man were attractive, and they took as their wives any they chose. Then the Lord said, My spirit shall not abide in man forever, for he is flesh. His days shall be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of man, and they bore children to them. These were the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown.
We'll stop there. So this story is giving you a glimpse into the creation that God made. He created at least two facets to his creation, a supernatural world and a physical world, and those worlds were intended to overlap. Man is a spirit, but we're embodied. We're made to dwell here. The angelic peoples, the supernatural spirits, are intended to dwell in the heavens, in the supernatural world. And so what we see here is that there is a group of angels who, rather than allowing God to define good and evil, seek to take what they want. It's laid out in such a way that they see and they take. That should remind you of Adam and Eve in the garden. Adam sees, Eve sees the fruit, that it's good, and then she takes it. Throughout the Bible, this see and take analogy is there to hyperlink this text back into our minds. This is about the temptation. This is about the fall. And this is a group of angels, of supernatural beings, who decided we want to rule in the physical world, not just in the supernatural world. We want to have power. And they come down into the world and they take women. And the idea that's given to us in Enoch is that families were trading women for power. If you give me knowledge about, I don't know, weapons or metallurgy or secrets from the other side, I will give you my daughter. And so then children are born that are not human and are not angelic. They're this half one, half the other chimeric kind of creature. And the Bible calls them giants or Nephilim. The word there, the Septuagint, says giants. That's what it is. There's a lot of argument about what Nephilim means, but you can go back and read what did the Jewish translators in Jesus' lifetime think that word meant, and they thought it meant giant. That's what it means. This is not normal. There were giants before the flood, and there were giants after the flood, but it's all connected to this angelic desire to have a kingdom on the earth. Are you following me at all? Jacob, you look like
Yeah,
you
no.
got
I
thoughts.
was thinking, I may have said this before, but I'm just going to bring it back up. Because I know that when I was going through Genesis some years ago, I just noticed that you have in chapter 4, and if I'm not mistaken, it's kind of where Cain is separated out. And he starts building city, but I believe it's him that starts building like bronze and iron weapons. And I just remember thinking, like, that's not a simple process. And so, like, hearing this, I'm like, okay, maybe he learned this from somewhere else. And so I just was processing that. Again, this is strange. This doesn't fit my real simple Bible stories of children's ministry. We talk about Cain and Abel and the first murder and that kind of stuff, but like him being cast away and where did Cain find his wife? I mean, I'm starting to ask questions like, is there any connection of, what was Cain fearing of being cast away? I mean, this opens up a whole other realm of questions, but here he is making bronze and iron weapons. They're having this very, very early.
Yeah, so in most ancient cultures, a blacksmith, someone working with metals, that wasn't seen as just one of the trade jobs that was out there. Those people were associated with wizards, witchcraft, because they were kind of brewing into existence mysterious things. They didn't teach this to just anybody. It was kept secret. And so especially if you read like some Irish folk tales, like St. Patrick, in like the Lorica, the breastplate of St. Patrick, he talks about this in there, that this was something that was connected to alchemy, connected to the idea of twisting something that God intended for good into something evil. And that's what a vice is. We were just kind of talking about this, Rose. But it isn't that a weapon necessarily is evil or bronze is evil, but the intent behind this is to deceive, to hurt, to harm. These beings came down with the desire to define right and wrong for themselves.
Let me ask this because it might be a question, and I don't know the answer either, and it might be a question someone's wondering is, how would the fallen ones have known? Like, is this resources that's available in the heavenly realm, and we just, again, in the newness of the world? I'm just these are the weird questions I have. Like,
yeah, so
how do they have this
I've
information?
heard people talk about this. I think in the end, Jacob, though, you have to come away and say anything that we say is going to be speculative.
Yeah, I know, but this is what's fun.
Yeah, so like, is there a Bible verse?
I need the facts.
that
Just
is
tell
like,
me what.
Yeah, only the facts.
Just speak like you're confident about it.
Yeah, I'm just going to tell you what I think that angelic or supernatural beings are incredibly creative. I don't think they're dumb. I don't think they're unintelligent. I don't think that they're incapable of art or of problem solving. I think that they're way, way smart. And so they were watching the earth. They were thinking, how can I use what's there for my advantage? How can I do this?
Yeah.
And I think that what you're seeing there isn't necessarily like they ran to the local hardware store in heaven and were like, now you can use this sharp knife and stick people.
But even like the pharmakia stuff, the roots that were used for medicines and things that were used for makeups and those kinds of things, it's like, I don't know, is this made up on the fly? Or were these like, well, how can we utilize elements of
Well,
the
I think
earth?
in that instance, it was lust that drove that. The
Yeah,
idea
that's true.
of the makeup that's
Attraction
in the
and-
book of Enoch. It says one of the things that the Watchers brought to the earth was makeup. And you're probably out there like, I knew that was the devil. And you're like, okay, that's not what it's talking. The idea is to deceive, to not be what you appear to be. It's more than eyeshadow at this point. Although mascara looks dangerous to me.
So it could be those fake eyelashes.
Guys,
Yes,
guys,
those
guys,
like
settle
spiders
down.
looking things
Yeah.
that
Settle down. I love mascara.
Yeah, it's so deceiving. I'm like, man, she has really long lashes. I'm always deceived by that.
no, but the idea is
Maybe she was born with it.
It's true.
Maybe it's Maybelline.
for instance, like this would be along the lines also of hiding your gender, of pretending to be a woman when you are in fact a man. That idea of deceit is there, and the Watchers are bringing into existence not something that's new, but the evil use of something that God has made. There's nothing wrong with makeup. There is something wrong with manipulative deceit upon
Right.
people.
Yeah.
John, I got a couple questions, and these may be very elementary questions.
Oh,
but
good.
I'd like to throw you a few softballs every now and then out there. So we're talking about Watchers. When you mentioned that, the Watchers are involved in the Babel story. That's where we started. And they are ruling over the territories.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also the same beings that were involved in the Genesis 6.
So I think the word watcher refers to what they're doing. That these are beings who are watching over the earth, and where they're supposed to have a beneficial, standing in the gap, protecting, shepherding kind of a role, like a guardian angel kind of a thing. They instead are acting to pervert and to twist and to control something.
So that's a perfect lead into my next question, because we've discussed about how serpent in the Bible doesn't always mean, Satan or
Right.
even evil.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems to me, so far at least, that Watcher always indicates a fallen being or a being in rebellion against God. Is that true?
Yeah, there is a weird place that is ambiguous. I don't know. For instance, Michael is called your prince, talking to Daniel, implying that perhaps the phrase watcher could be used to refer to Michael. And so I think a watcher can have good intention or it can have evil intention. And I think at times God's will overrides theirs. He says, this is how it's going to be, and that's how it's going to be.
So yet again, it's just a job description, basically. Of
I think
the
so,
being.
yeah.
And
Uh-huh.
the being has their own free will to decide whether they will be with or without God's will or God's plan.
Mm-hmm. And so these fellows, before the flood, they decide, listen, I'm going to, and the fruit that they take is mankind. We're going to take it, and we're going to rule over the people. And their children, the Nephilim, become giants. And the book of Enoch, the first part of the book of Enoch, is called the Book of the Watchers. And they are not nice, they are evil, they are really big. And the story comes down, the flood happens, the archangels descend, and there's this imprisoning of these rebellious spirits. And so they ask Enoch, this is not in the Bible, this is in the book of Enoch. They say, Enoch, why don't you go to God and ask God to be nice to us? Let us out. And the reply that Enoch gets from God is, no, they were supposed to intercede for you, not you for them. You're stuck. That's where you are. And so you have these beings who are still in chains. The book of Peter talks about this. The book of Jude talks about this. Angels that left their estate and they sinned in such a way that God chained them up in everlasting chains of darkness. And their children, the Nephilim, the demonic forces of this world, are still loosed upon this world. And so there is a way, it's kind of like the Godfather, he's in jail, but he's still sending orders kind of out to his minions and things that are out there. We kind of get that impression from the occult. Now, whether that's accurate or whether that's demonic propaganda, it comes down again to it's the speculation. We don't know. But we do know that God is not going to allow them to achieve what they're hoping to. That the mere fact that even though they control the power, God triumphs through humility. Rome was deeply under the influence of demonic presences. And it's through a carpenter that the whole world is upturned through his death. And so the Lord seems to delight in raising the humble to overthrow the mighty. And so even though you have guys like the Caesars murdering Christians, Christianity has way outlived the Roman Empire. That's not an accident. That's a sign of the providential hand of God inside of creation. Now, those beings, those watchers, do things at different times in the book of the Bible. In particular, the only biblical book that you're going to find this phrase in is the book of Daniel that takes place in Babylon. But you're going to find this concept in lots of places. This is a reality. This is a supernatural glimpse behind the curtain. There are beings with great power who are still alive, still active on the earth. They're not the same ones as before the flood, because the Bible tells us that those were taken prisoner for their crimes and that the Lord has put them away. But there were lots of others who were eager to take their place, apparently. And so what happens in Deuteronomy 32 is God says, listen, if you want to be worshiping these gods, by all means, go ahead and worship those gods, but I'm going to bring all men unto myself. When I am raised up, I will draw all men unto myself. And so what Jesus does is the breaking of the chains of these principalities, these powers. But the book of the Bible that you're going to see these guys at work most clearly is in the book of Daniel. And you're going to find it in the book of Daniel, chapter 4. And so go ahead and get your Bibles and get ready to turn there. Daniel chapter 4, verses 10 through 18. But this story of the watchers coming down to the earth wasn't just something that the Jewish people believed in. Many of the ancient peoples believed that there were gods who came down to the earth. And they associate that coming down with a particular place, with a mountain called Mount Hermon, which is in the north of Israel. When we were in Dan, we were over by this, Caesarea Philippi, where the gates of hell are described. That's the foot of Mount Hermon. But there is on the very top of Mount Hermon a place called Qusar Antar, and it is literally the highest temple in the ancient world. As far as I know, there is no temple that is higher in elevation than this temple on top of Mount Hermon. It's 9,232 feet above sea level. It's a great big old mountain. And this temple is found, it's a rectangular building, and it's sitting on this plateau of stone, and it's open to the sky. Apparently there was never a roof put on this temple, so that you were looking up into the heavens. You're at this high point where heaven and earth meet. And apparently what was being worshipped there is the watchers. There's a stone from the Roman times that's been uncovered. And the translation that I found says, according to the command of the greatest and holy God, those who take an oath proceed from here. And if you're reading the book of Enoch, that's going to ring a lot of bells. That, you know what, they came down and they swore an oath that they would do this together. This was like a United Nations kind of a thing of evil. And so the Bible talks about, not the Bible rather, but the book of Enoch talks about a being called Semyaza, who is the leader of this angelic rebellion against God. And so even today, when you are doing archaeology on Mount Hermon, you're going to find connections back to this story. That's not an accident. That's because this was really part of the ancient psyche of ancient peoples.
So you just mentioned that there was a leader of this.
Yep, Semyaza.
So my question that I'm kind of stewing on over here is, humankind rebelled against God in the garden by taking the fruit, seeing and taking, right? That's what we're going as. Now, these watchers do basically the same thing. They rebel against God, but in a different facet. There's one thing that I can see as a glaring difference. One is Satan, the deceiver, is in the garden, and he tempts Eve with the fruit. What tempted the watchers to want to rebel against God?
Seeing something and desiring to exert your own will on it. I'll define what's right and what's wrong. I've always kind of thought, so apparently there's 200 of these beings who fall on Mount Hermon, according to the ancient myths. The Bible doesn't give us a number or a place. It just says that it happened. And in the ancient Jewish mindset, this is the place that they talk about it having happened at. There's this idea that they were perhaps already here on the earth, but had a job to protect and to shepherd humanity in a good way. And they decide, wouldn't it be better if instead of serving God, we served ourselves? which is exactly what Eve is doing. By taking the apple or pomegranate or cashew, I don't know what fruit it was, but whatever.
Cashew is a fruit?
Yeah.
Wow.
I actually learned that at work the other day because I said that it was a nut, and then I got.
Yeah, it's not a nut, but it is in the nut little boxes, bags, whatever those are, cans. That's what I'm looking for.
Someone should tell Meyer. They have it in the nut section.
Well, there's not really a seed section, is there? It's not really a seed. It's part of the. Whatever. Anyway.
Yeah, moving on.
The idea is we don't know. This is what makes it fascinating. Is there's all this speculation. There is politics in the unseen world.
I guess what I'm trying to get at is we have that desire now as human beings because we are post-fall.
Right.
We are in a broken world, so we easily have the flesh, if you will, or this desire to, say what is right and what is wrong. That gives you power. That gives you authority when you are the one that decides it. Was there a fall in this angelic world that now these watchers have that same desire?
So my view on this is different from a lot of people's views. I was taught in good Paradise Lost fashion that Satan fell with all of his angels before the creation of the world. And somehow, undercover, Satan sneaks into the garden using all of his Mission Impossible skills, gets right up to the one place in the world you don't want him to be, and tempts Eve into sin. I think that when that being, the serpent, sinned in the garden, he fell. One. The rest of the angels that are fallen seem to have come in staggered fashion.
So you think that the fall in Genesis 3 not only affected mankind in the way that they now have this fleshly desire, now that is what we call it nowadays, but the angelic realm also now is instilled with this desire to overcome, to become their own God.
Because one of the things that I've always found interesting about this story is if God chained up those watchers, those angelic beings who rebelled in the flood, why did you not chain up Satan? Like, if I was going to make a who's who, heaven's most wanted list, surely that guy is high on the list. He didn't get arrested. He didn't get put in jail. Apparently not. He seems to have deceived his fellow creatures, just like he deceived the keepers of this world.
Almost as if there is a law of justice, even in God's eyes, and Satan really hasn't done anything other than making other people take the fall for him.
You got to remember, like when Satan gives us the I wills later on, he says, "I want to be higher than the other stars of heaven. I want to be higher." He desires to overpower, to manipulate.
Weren't the ones that are locked up, are they the ones that died in the days of Noah?
I think so.
So what if, I'm just throwing it out there, and I know this is kind of rabbit trail, which I love it, but I never thought about this. What if Satan hadn't taken on a human form necessarily? The ones that are locked up are the ones that were part of the Nephilim agenda. Nephilim,
and I think that they're mentioned again in the Bible outside of the book of Genesis, in the book of Revelation.
Yeah.
In the book of Revelation, it talks about a deep pit being opened and demonic figures, supernatural evil pouring forth. And it says they have a king over them. And that king is not Satan. It's some other guy. Who is this? What's being talked about? How do you have a king? Like, I just always thought this was
Nimrod.
as divided as like good guy, bad guy. White hat, black hat, back the old spy movie kind of a thing. And
Spy versus Spy?
Mm-hmm.
Like
well, yeah.
Mad Magazine?
I was thinking Get Smart, but yeah, we can do Spy versus Spy.
Mm-hmm.
It seems that Satan is not only deceiving mankind in this story.
That's right.
He's deceiving these other spiritual beings into basically taking the fall by making them. I think the only way it makes sense in my mind is he's tempting them the same way he tempted Eve.
I think so. And I don't know that then he becomes their ruler as much as he's tempted them to take power for themselves. And so this creature...
To cause chaos, right?
To cause chaos. That's what he is. Mm-hmm.
To shake the paradigm.
And so then what we find is throughout history, there are beings who are opposed to the will of God in action in the world. The Bible tells us that Daniel prayed and an angel was dispatched to answer him. And he gets jumped by this demonic figure called the Prince of Persia. And he's very upset about this. He's like, listen, I'm sorry, I was delayed. It was really awkward. And I've got to actually go back now because the Prince of Greece, there's a whole kerfuffle happening in the supernatural world, all to get you your mail, Daniel. So I hope you're appreciative of this, but I've got to go. And so we're recognizing that what to us would look as simple as, why didn't my prayer get answered quickly, is actually part of supernatural warfare and forces arrayed against one another. There's a tremendous amount of mystery and I think just wonder. What is happening when I talk to God? My voice rising into the presence of the Lord.
Before we go further in Daniel, can I read a couple of these verses that we've been alluding to or talking to just for the sake of...
for sure.
So 2 Peter 2, it says, and in verse 4, for if God did not spare angels when they sinned, but sent them to hell, putting them in the chains of darkness to be held for judgment, if he did not spare the ancient world when he brought the flood on its ungodly people, but protected Noah, a preacher of righteousness, and 7 others, if he condemned the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah by burning them into ashes and made them, which is interesting. I think the connection between all the three is something worth talking about later on. And then,
let's do that for just a second. I don't think the connection that's there is homosexuality.
I don't either.
I think it has to. Remember that these people wanted to have relationships in Sodom and Gomorrah
Strange
with
flesh.
angels.
Yeah.
It has to do with the interaction between the angelic courts and the realm of humanity.
It goes back to Genesis 3. There's going to be a bloodline or a seed war. There'll be enmity between you and a woman, her offspring and your offspring. This is why all these pieces start to kind of make sense.
And what's interesting to me about this is there's tremendous room for just wonder.
Yeah.
If you're going to come down and be like, I want the official version of this, I don't know where you would even go to get it. You can know this is how the Bible talks about it, but it really is like an appetizer sampler. Like there's just enough here to let you know this exists.
Like we get little snapshots. Like this verse here, it says, and this is Jude chapter 1, and it's verse 6, and the angels who did not keep their positions of authority, but abandoned their proper dwelling, these he has kept in darkness, bound with everlasting chains for judgment on the great day. In a similar way, Sodom and Gomorrah, and
and again, it links those stories.
But it's interesting. Like when this is on here, it's like, Jude, can you, or Paul, can you guys explain this? It seemed that they understood. He's using a common
Jude,
understanding as an example. Like everyone know. Like, oh yeah.
They knew this. This was
But
part of
we're lacking.
their cultural river that they were swimming in. They understood this. Jude actually quotes from the book of Enoch. This was part of their culture. They knew this. Just like if I said, well, Sherlock Holmes said, no one is out there thinking that I know Sherlock Holmes. You just know this the same as I do.
Right.
It's part of our the way we communicate with each other. Or if you're quoting Monty Python lines, like it's the same thing. You know this collectively. You know this. Sometimes you'll get together with friends, and part of the fun of a movie is the quoting of its lines incessantly whenever it's funny.
Unless you quote Monty Python around Jeremy, because he hates it so much.
Which makes it
That's
worth
what makes
doing.
it fun.
Yes, it is.
So, Sydney, I know you're out there. Please be brushing up on your Monty Python quotes for when you see your dad next time.
Yes.
But let's jump into Daniel, because it is going to give us a glimpse here of the Watchers behaving unexpectedly good. And it's thrown a monkey wrench into many people's view of this topic.
Daniel 4, starting in 10, correct?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Now these were the visions in my mind as I lay on my bed. I was looking, and behold, there was a tree in the midst of the earth, and its height was great. The tree grew large and became strong, and its height reached to the sky, and it was visible to the end of the whole earth. Its foliage was beautiful, and its fruit abundant, and in it was food for all. The beasts of the field found shade under it, and the birds of the sky dwelt in its branches, and all living creatures fed themselves from it.
Now, if you're interested in this, you can go read or listen to our episode on Joseph's tree and Nebuchadnezzar's tree, because we really did a deep dive into this. But the cliff notes of this is a vision in which God is telling not Nicodemus, but Nebuchadnezzar, that you are like a tree. And so thank you, Dr. Osborne, for unpacking all that stuff for us. But this is how you can engage in the conversation. How do I know what he's talking about? That you're like a tree whose leaves are beautiful, whose fruit is desirous. You bring shade, you bring wonder, you are a blessing. The Bible is later in the New Testament going to talk about the kingdom of heaven this way.
Right. Everyone could see you and knows about you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you become great.
Yeah, and so let's keep going.
I was looking in the visions in my mind as I lay on my bed, and behold, an angelic watcher, a holy one, descended from heaven.
Now, what does that mean? a watcher, a holy one?
Hold on, let me check my app and tell me what it tells.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, waking, watchful, wakeful one, watcher, angel.
My version says messenger.
A messenger. Yeah,
But that would be angel.
Yeah, this is a representative of the divine
Council.
court, of the divine council. Word has come down, Nebuchadnezzar. You are under
decision
judgment.
has been made.
A decision
Yeah.
has been made. There are places in the Bible where we get the glimpse into the workings of heaven, that God doesn't just sit up there and ignore the angels as though they have no part in what's going on, just like God allows humans to be part of his will. I love that God lets me be part of this. I love the line in Scripture where it talks about through the foolishness of preaching, because really what we do is pretty ridiculous. Like, we're sitting here with our microphones talking to each other and just kind of clicking a button and hoping someone out there gets helped. That's really random. So, like, if you're out there thinking, can I podcast? If we can podcast, you can podcast, okay? And so this idea is it's really random. Our strength is not able to carry the day, but he allows us to be part of his plan and his purpose. He also does this with the angels. There seems to have been a meeting during which they talked about this. Nebuchadnezzar is going to be humbled. I'm taking options. Please submit it in the box in the back of the room, or maybe they talked about it. There is an instance in the books of Kings where there's a description about how King Ahab is going to die, and the angelic court assembles and talks. I would like to have heard, what do you think was like the most out there idea that angels were like,
Well, something that's interesting, though,
he's just going to ignore it. I want like a cloud to turn into like a dragon and like.
Don't worry, my imagination's running. But what's something that's interesting is I saw a thought of what makes a good leader.
Mm-hmm.
And it said a good leader isn't the one that has all the answers or all the ideas, but it's the one that makes sure all the ideas are heard. And it sounds like God is operating under that same way.
Yeah, it isn't that God needs their advice any more than God needs me to pray. It's that God is allowing me, his child, to be part of what we're doing.
And if you think of, since God is omnipotent and all the omnis, why does he need anything? Why would he create in the first place, right? It shows the insignificance of creation.
He does not need
if there's not any involvement that is in there.
It is we that need, not him. God is perfectly capable of being incredible, like all just, all wise, all merciful, all on his own.
And if he only acted in that capacity, then there would be no need for creation.
None at all.
But obviously, he does not. He has the ability to, but decides.
And I think part of that goes back to our conversation after we had Dr. Osborne on. We kind of small grouped and talked about this. But not everything is utilitarian. Not everything is there to do a thing. Some things exist simply for the beauty of them, for the wonder of them, for the joy of them. Like, here's a song. Listen to this. Why? Because you're going to like it. Yeah, but what does it do for me? It doesn't do anything for you. It just is wonderful. You should listen to it. I might say, like, it lifts up my heart or makes me glad or makes me angry or gets me whatever. It doesn't really do that. It's just music. It's just a painting. It's just pictures. It's just whatever. But God is more than we can imagine, and his thoughts are more than what we're asking him to do. He's not just up there in heaven like, okay, I got a problem, let me create a solution. That's how we would operate. But God is so much bigger than that. And so he's allowing these beings to be part of this story. And so when it uses the phrase watcher here, I think that's implying that these creatures have a say in what's happening over the nations. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And so it makes sense that this would happen in Babylon. It makes sense that this would happen during the time of Daniel. The language, all that fits here. But I think the usage of the word watcher here, and not just saying an angel appeared to me, this telegraphs to me what's going to be happening in this story. Keep going.
He shouted out and spoke as follows. Chop down the tree and chop off its branches. Strip off its foliage and scatter its fruit. Let the beasts flee from under it and the birds from its branches. Yet leave the stump with its roots in the ground, but with a band of iron and bronze around it, and the new grass of the field, and let him be drenched with the dew from heaven, and let him share with the beasts and the grass of the earth. Let his mind be changed from that of a man, and let a beast's mind be given to him, and let 7 periods of time pass over him. This sentence is by the decree of the angelic watchers, and the decision is a command of the holy ones.
Okay, now this doesn't say this is what God said. Normally, that's what an angel says. The Lord came and he said to tell you, stop it. Or, Mary, blessed are you, highly favored. You're going to have a baby. God has said something, and now I'm here to tell you. This messenger comes not just from God, but he says this is going to happen because the divine court has said so. And the Lord is going to allow it. They don't act independently of him. This is not God's brain trust. This is not like, God's like, this is a really confusing one, guys. How about you take care of this one? The Lord is capable. He allows them to have a say in the punishment of one of his enemies. And he says, this is going to happen by the decree of the watchers. The decision by the word of the holy ones. Why? Keep going.
In order that the living may know that the Most High is ruler over the realm of mankind.
There it is. Why? These are beings who are acting in a loyal way. We recognize one king, that he and he alone is the ruler of the universe. And so we have come to tell you you're going to be torn down. And so this gives me a really interesting view into the way that the angelic world and the human world interact with each other. Pride goes before a fall isn't just a proverb. It's a very real sense of spiritual warfare. If you are going to side with the darkness, the light will overpower it. How will that happen? Well, it happens differently. One of the Nephilim, right, you got Goliath out there. It was some shepherd kid who beat him in the face with a rock and then chopped his head off. Unexpected. Nobody thought that was going to happen.
Plot twist.
Plot twist, yeah. You see this all over the place. The powers are ruling all over the earth, and all of a sudden it starts to rain real bad. And everyone dies. No one saw that coming. Even the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus is unexpected. If they had known, they would never have crucified the Lord of glory. This is one of those moments that shows the richness of God's creation. I am not saying that these are rival gods or that God needs help. I'm simply showing you how the Bible talks about what God has made. And so I don't want anyone going out of here thinking I've turned into a polytheist of some kind, because I have not. But let's jump down to verse 19. Jacob, do you mind picking that up?
And Daniel, also called Belteshazzar, was greatly perplexed for a time, and his thoughts terrified him. So the king said, Belteshazzar, do not let the dream or its meaning alarm you. Belteshazzar answered, My lord, if only the dream applied to your enemies and its meaning to your adversaries. The tree you saw, which grew large and strong with its top touching the sky, visible to the whole earth, with beautiful leaves and abundant fruit, providing food for all, giving shelter to the wild animals, and having nesting places in its branches for the birds. Your majesty, you are that tree.
Okay, that's what a kingdom is supposed to be. That's what God made a kingdom to be. Something that gives shelter, that gives hope, that gives beauty and food for the lesser beings that are out there. It shades, it protects. Instead, Daniel's king, Belteshazzar, or Belteshazzar is Daniel, but Nebuchadnezzar has become like the Watchers. He's predatory. He's evil. He is filled with hatred and violence, and he's going to be judged. This has come upon him. And if you're not picking up Eden vibes in this, you absolutely should be. There is a tree in Eden that has the same kind of characteristics are talked about it, and you see it again in the book of Revelation. Jump down to verse 24.
24.
Mm-hmm.
This is the interpretation, your majesty, and this is the decree that the Most High has issued against my lord, the king.
Who issued it?
It said the Watchers earlier, but now it's saying the Most High.
It did say the Watchers earlier.
Same?
Same. This is the same court. This isn't saying like, okay, there's this, the House of Representatives are over here. Maybe now the House of Lords is going to say something, or the House of Representatives, whatever. You've got this. This is one body. This is a king, and he has spoken and he has endorsed this. This isn't one party against the other. This is a glimpse into how heaven is operating. And I think that's fascinating because it shows us that there's much more to our world than we like to boil down into our Hallmark cards and our Christmas trees.
Is it hard for us to think that God might share rulership? I mean, if we really think about it, he's done that with Adam and Eve. It does seem like, and we always say this, and I'll say this too, we always get to this this fearful place because we know what's going to happen later on is God doesn't need help.
He does not.
And no one's ever said that. But God chooses to work alongside some of his creation for some reason. I don't know why. It's just a glimpse of who he is.
I would actually see this just a tiny bit differently, and this might be splitting hairs.
Split
But the
hairs.
first part, I'll do it. The first part says over in verse 17, "For this has been decreed by the messengers, it is commanded by the holy ones, so that everyone may know that the Most High rules over the kingdoms of the world." And then over here in verse 24, it says, "This is what the dream means, your majesty, and what the Most High has declared will happen to my lord the king." It seems like it's been decreed by the messengers or the watchers, but declared by the Lord. So it's it's not
It's still
really
participation.
It is participation,
of
yeah.
What my
It's-
point
decision.
is
Like
not to view this as, so a pagan would view this as rival powers. That there is one God and then all these extra gods that serve him. The Bible is drawing a different statement. It's saying that just like here, a king will have counselors and officials and people that work for him. In heaven, God also has creatures, beings who are involved in serving him, and they're not just imaginary paper men. They really have a function. They really do things. There's ideas, there's purpose, there's discussion, there's relationships between them and God. We normally think of that just being us, but it seems to be a much bigger idea than that. And when it goes back to rulership, you have to remember that mankind was created to have dominion here on the earth.
Right.
We are to image God. And so when we are not imaging him well, when we are not carrying his name, when we've not taken up our cross, it matters. And there's going to be repercussions in our lives and in the lives of other people. And we see that in big stories like Daniel, but you'll also see this in little stories like yours and mine, in the way that we interact with other people.
Are you going to keep going down further in this chapter, or was that?
I just wanted to go just a teeny bit farther because I hate to not end it on this great line in verse 25. And it says that you shall be driven from among men, and your dwelling shall be with the beasts of the field. You shall be made to eat grass like an ox, to be wet with the dew of heaven, and 7 periods of time shall pass over you. And here's the good part, till you know that the Most High rules the kingdom of men and gives it to whom he will.
Hang on. But the stump and the roots of the tree were left in the ground. This means that you will receive your kingdom back again when you have learned that heaven rules. That feels to me like what you were saying, the court and the king ruling, not together, but the partnership or
The
whatever you
only
were saying.
reason the court has any authority is because,
God give it to him.
yes.
Exactly.
So all that I'm trying to say is don't view these as rival things. And when they become rival, they're fallen. The princes that are opposed to God are going to be judged. Psalm 82 is all about this. He says that God stands in the congregation of the mighty, or if you're reading he stands among the gods, and he says, what in the world are you doing?
This kind of stuff, though, I mean, I can't help but to think of like the Clash of the Titans and those kinds of movies where there's like this heavenly meeting and Zeus and all the. You get what I'm saying? I mean, they didn't.
Absolutely.
This
Yeah.
this didn't spin out of nowhere. It's a
No,
concept that's
but
been.
our culture is so individualistic
Yeah.
that we have a hard time conceiving heaven as anything corporate at all. That
That's
there
true.
would be something, we like to imagine this like, well, there's probably like a white couch that's really comfy, and I sit down next to God and he goes over my review, and we're like, maybe you could have done better here. And most of your relationships with God are very intimate, one-on-one, a little chatty over a cup of tea. When the Bible talks about the throne of the Lord, it's almost universal in scope and mind-blowing in depth, that it is unbelievably great and awesome. We have dumbed this down into a make me feel better about myself kind of story,
Yeah.
when in reality it is quite literally awesome. It is the sum of all. It leaves you like when Isaiah sees the Lord, he says, I'm going to die.
Yep.
I should not be here. I am unclean, and I am definitely in clean space. This is going to go really bad. Martin, you're scribbling away. What are you scribbling over?
Another
there?
time. Another time. I got a whole nother
It's
episode.
another episode
ready.
right here.
He's been
right, I
writing
like
like
that.
an article or a book over here with.
Yeah, normally Martin will give like a thumbs up or like he'll jot a thought down, but he really has filled up like a whole page here.
Yeah, it's a whole nother podcast. Don't worry.
No, I like it. So
Coming soon.
what I'd like to do then is to pull this then into the New Testament, to take you into the book of 1 Corinthians and in chapter 2. I actually just preached this past Sunday, and it's been floating around in my head because it is a connection, a bridge between the Old and the New Testament. So would you read 1 Corinthians 2, verses 6 through 9?
Yet when I am among mature believers, I do speak with words of wisdom, but not the kind of wisdom that belongs to this world or to the rulers of this world.
To the who?
The rulers
Of
this world,
that is talking about the supernatural beings.
who are soon forgotten. No, the wisdom we speak is the mystery of God, his plan that was previously hidden, even though he made it for our ultimate glory before the world began. But the rulers of this world have not understood it. If they had, they would not have crucified our glorious Lord. That is what the scriptures mean when they say, no eye has seen, no ear has heard, and no mind has imagined what God has prepared for those who love him.
That's kind of disappointing that it said our glorious Lord.
The Lord of glory.
Lord of glory.
Yes.
Yeah, it's that line from Psalms. Who is this King of glory?
The Lord.
The
is
Lord,
King.
mighty and awesome. Lift up your gates. This idea of the triumphant King entering into the city is connected here. And there's a quote in the bottom of this that says, as it is written. And this comes out of the book of Isaiah. And in New Testament writing and in Old Testament writing, there was a way that the authors had of loading imagery into a text by giving you a line from it. And what that meant was go back and read the whole thing or remember this whole text. It didn't just mean, here's my verse that I'm going to use to back up what I'm thinking. It was a way of saying, go back and read where this came from. And this was a text that the Jewish community
Or they had
would
it
have known.
memorized.
They had it memorized, yeah.
And so they would
like
think
for
of the
us,
whole
like
thing.
John 3:16, like would then imply the whole text
Right.
of John. So this line that normally gets trotted out like God's really cool and he can give you great stuff, more than you can ask, think, or imagine. That's true. But the content is way bigger than that. Way bigger than that. I want to read this to you. And this is actually, Martin is going to read this.
Oh, cool. Isaiah 63, starting in 19.
Yeah, it's going to start in verse, start in 18.
Okay. Isaiah 63:18. For a little while your people possessed your holy place, but now our enemies have trampled down your sanctuary. We are yours from of old, but you have not ruled over them. They have not been called by your name.
Okay, so that sounds really bad. The powers of this world have dominion over us. And he's asking, won't you come back? Won't you lift us up again? Won't you end the occupation? And then chapter 64 starts, and it is amazing.
Oh, that you would rend the heavens and come down, that the mountains would tremble before you, as when fire sets twigs ablaze and causes water to boil. Come down to make your name known to your enemies and cause the nations to quake before you.
The nations. This is not just talking about the human beings. This is saying, judge your enemies, O God. This is Isaiah saying, Lord, I wish you would just rip the heavens open and come down here and judge the enemy. Bring about their destruction. Keep going.
For when you did awesome things that we did not expect, you came down, and the mountains trembled before you. Since ancient times no one has heard, no ear has perceived, no eye has seen any God besides you, who acts on behalf of those who wait for him.
And there's your quote. So the idea is, God, you who act in unexpected ways, I wish you would come down from heaven and break the enemy. And that happened. Jesus came to earth, was born in Bethlehem, lived a sinless life, and was taken not by mankind alone, but the princes of the darkness. And if they had known what was happening, they would not have crucified the Lord of glory. Instead, what happened is God does not seem to think that mankind is his enemy. He doesn't say, and I'm going to kill all the Romans, or I'm going to kill all the Pharisees. He offers salvation to those. He says, Father, forgive them. They know not what they do. When you did awesome things, Lord, that we did not look for. When I read this, I'm just amazed at the glory of Jesus, at the creativity of God, at the wideness of his creation, and just his marvelous plans. And so watchers are real. They're kind of creepy. They've not gone away, and they're very mysterious. But to study the watchers is ultimately to be led to the cross, because it is on the cross that the judgment of the nations takes place. All of our sin is placed upon Christ. He dies for us and rises again. This is the gospel.